a bonus point win for Glasgow as they confirmed their spot in the knockout stages. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. Glasgow had to work a bit more for this win than the start of the game would have implied, but they got there, they got over the line, and yeah, like it feels like now at this stage, they're pretty much like they have to be qualified with the amount of points they have now for the knockout stages, and now kind of their thinking needs to turn towards getting one of the top seeds for that knockout stage. I think that's where they should be at this stage. But we'll go through the game and then we'll talk about each of the teams afterwards. So, first of all, Clermont with pressure in the Glasgow half in the opening couple of minutes, but handling errors causing promising moves to break down for them. And, we've seen it a lot in this competition. Teams able to get themselves in positions, but when the accuracy just isn't there, they can lose momentum, and that's what happens to them. So we have Hugh Jones and Tuipulotu. They lead the charge out of their own 22 for Glasgow. They bring the play up to 5 metres from the Clermont line. There's then a TMO check for a penalty try, but there was cover. So who was it? Sawakula. He goes to the bin for a deliberate knock-on, but there's no penalty try. Glasgow then, they're knocking on the door now, and they go to the corner a few times. Finally then, they get over from a 5-metre line-out. Winger Stain actually is the jumper in the line-out. Glasgow, I think, the most innovative team in terms of their 5-metre line-outs. The variation in not just the line itself, but also the maul and everything that comes off that as well. They set up the maul and then they drive over, and Ferry is the scorer. Conversion missed, 5 points to 0. We then have another period of Clermont possession just outside of Glasgow 22, but the Glasgow defence holds them out and force a knock on. Clermont then, they're back to 15, but shortly after, Glasgow strike again. They move it in midfield. Lancaster puts Jones through a gap, and he goes over from about 30 metres out, converted for 12 points to 0. Zamora then, with a quick tap penalty, he darts into Glasgow 22. The forwards bring them to about 5 metres out. They go wide, and then the ball goes loose. Glasgow kick it downfield, and now pressure switches back to Clermont. We have a dink over the top into the 22 from Jones. The bounce beats the covering Gio. So Kyle Rowe gets the bouncing ball. He's tackled a couple of metres short of the line, but he offloads to Kyle Stain to go over for Glasgow's third, converted for 19 points to 0, and a brilliant start from them. Clermont then, they win a scrum penalty. They go up the line into the 22, through a number of phases in the 22. They also, they almost go over through Del Rey on the left, but there's actually a really good tackle from Horn that prevents him doing that. Clermont, though, they still got the ball. They recycle, they shift it inside, and Moala does get over, convert for 19 points to 7. And one thing I really like about Clermont, I've talked about it before, is that they're one of those French sides that no matter their form or how things are going in the top 14, they always get this competition the respect it deserves. And I think their performance today shows that as well. They may not be doing brilliantly in the competition, but they're not one of these French teams you just go, oh, well, not going our way. We're not going to put any effort in. They put in huge effort in this game, and they really did make Glasgow work for the win. Clermont then, offside. Glasgow, they've got a central penalty about 8 metres out or so. They tap it, and then they shift it left, and Dempsey goes over for the bonus point try, converted for 26 points to 7. Clock in the red. Clermont, a metre out. They're winning multiple penalty advantage. Glasgow get a warning. Clermont tap the penalty, go through a number of phases. around about a metre to half a metre out. They go wide, but Glasgow hold them up over the line. Halftime score is 26-7. And that was one, I think, of the pivotal moments in the game, because it felt like if Clermont have got over, in that period and made it, let's say 26-12 or 26-14 at the break, suddenly that shift of momentum going into the second half could have been a big difference in the game. In the second half then, Clermont, they worked themselves into a good position, a few metres out at the start of the half, but Ferry gets over the ball to win a penalty and Glasgow are able to clear. And again, pivotal moments there that will kind of get lost in the fact that Glasgow come out with the winner anyway. But Clermont, with those, sustained periods of pressure just before and just after the break, but Glasgow able to keep them out during those periods at least. We then have a scrum penalty and then an offside from Glasgow, and that combination allows Clermont to kick into the corner. Schickling then goes to the bin because he's offside when Clermont break from the maul. We also have a TMO check for a deliberate knock-on from Horn. And there's a clear overlap in that one. So it's a penalty try to Clermont and Horn is going to the bin as well. So the score now 26-14. And I thought it was a bit funny to hear Kyle Steyn. So Luke Pearce is explaining to him about the 2 yellow cards. And then when he's done, Steyn asks something like, well, can one of them come back or something like that? Thinking that we should have only got 1 yellow card out of that. But Luke Pearce says, no, sorry, it doesn't work like that. It's just a bit of a funny moment. Clermont then not rolling, and quick thinking from Doby buys a penalty for Glasgow, because basically there's 2 Clermont players not rolling out of the way, lying on the ground, picks the ball up and just passes it into one of them, and gets a very kickable penalty for them. They call for the tee, but Lancaster's effort is off target. Glasgow then, they pretty much dominate possession during the double yellow card period where they're down to 13, and they almost see it out, like they're a hair's breadth away from actually seeing it out without conceding. But the final play before they're back to 15, Clermont break down the right, and Simone goes over out wide, converted for 26 points to 21. And now it really is game on at this stage. And again, you've got to give credit to Clermont for not, heads not going down, they're fighting back in, and also the crowd. There was a massive crowd there for this game. It wasn't seen, Clermont again haven't done all that well in the competition at all like this season, but still massive passionate crowd there, and it's the reason why they're one of my favorite French teams. And from here we have Glasgow. They go to the corner from a penalty, they go to the maul, and the usual way they do it sometimes, backs piling in to add some extra weight, but the maul is halted. Clermont do very well to do that. And the ball, they almost get the ball held in as well, and they would have got a turnover. But Glasgow managed to get the ball out. Lancaster then goes close before being actually dragged over the line by Zamora, and then gets held up. Very clever thinking from Zamora there. Clermont then, though, they put the drop out on the full and invite the pressure back on themselves. And again, that missed kick, really was telling in the end. So we have a 5-minute scrum to Glasgow. They win a penalty at the scrum, and then they opt for another one. Then scrum penalty again, and Clermont, they get a warning at this stage. And the way things are at the minute is that their Clermont starting loose head has already had to come back on because the replacement loose head went off injured. So the referee, Luke Pearce, basically says to him that if you go to the bin, then your team are going to go down to 13 because your penalty will have been the cause for us going to uncontested scrums, and therefore the rule kicks in that if a team, other than injury, ends up going down to uncontested scrums, then another guy has to go off at that stage. So that's what was on the line for them. And then actually later on, the same loose head has to go for an HIA, and then they're allowed to bring on the tight head that went off, the starting tight head, because it was an HIA. They could actually stay at 15, and that was kind of interesting little cameo of the rules I felt there. But from here then, Clermont, they're much stronger in the scrum this time, and it's messy ball for Glasgow, but they do force another penalty, as they're going through phases. Matt Fagerson then goes quickly from that. He stopped just short, recycle a few times on the line before Fagerson gets held up over the line. And you might be thinking about that, all of that, and Glasgow didn't score. So how was putting the ball out on the full from the drop so pivotal? And the reason, because for me at least, was that it was more pressure that Glasgow were putting on Clermont, and finally later on in the game we see that all of that effort goes into their legs, and I think it caught up with them towards the end. But Glasgow then play is kind of shifted back out towards the halfway line, but then a combination of Williamson, who makes the original break, and then Stevens, who he offloads the ball to, they combine to get Glasgow from the halfway line up to about 5 meters out. They then move the ball from the centre out to the right. Williamson involved again, and it's then Stain is out on the right, and there's nobody there to tackle him. And for me, that's the effect that period had on Clermont, that they just didn't have the legs to be able to cover the field. And Stain goes over, he scores in the corner, converted from out wide for 33 points to 21. Clermont then, they're still not done, in this game. They still have some fight left in them, and they work it up to 5 meters out. They're looking for a late rally, but Rowe managed to intercept close to his own line. He looks like he's going to break out of the 22, and potentially, if he does that, if he breaks the line, he could go coast to coast and score a try that puts the game, well beyond doubt. But there's a tap tackle on him just on the edge of the 22, and it doesn't affect it in terms of who wins the game, but it certainly made it still exciting for the last couple of minutes. But Glasgow do see out those last couple of minutes, and the full-time score is 33-21. And for me, this was, it looked like it was going to go the way of, I just covered the Bulls versus Bristol game, and it looked like it was going to go that way, in that there was going to be, because of the 3 tries early on, that there'd be a gap and it wouldn't be that exciting. But Clermont coming back into the game certainly did bring some excitement, especially in the second half. So we're going to have a look at the stats, and then we'll chat briefly about each of the teams. Right, so let me pull the stats up here on the official site. There we go. Okay, so first up, tries. So Clermont with 3 tries, Glasgow with 5, so it's a bonus point win for them. And, brilliant start, or like first 3 rounds from them in this competition. And it feels like, in terms of their pool performance, this is a step above anything that they've produced before. On to then attack. So 370 meters for Clermont from 137 carries, and 465 from 135 for Glasgow. So Glasgow at about 3.5 meters per carry. Around about that, about 3.5. And then Clermont are around about 3 meters per carry. Pretty close on there, I think. Then clean breaks, 6 for Clermont, 10 for Glasgow, and that's from 22 defenders beaten to 25. So round about 1-4 for Clermont, and just under kind of 1-2 for Glasgow. And Glasgow, I felt like, Hugh Jones just back from injury, that Hugh Jones to Piloto axis in the midfield was really good at just getting them, go forward and finding those little chinks in the defence, and really had a big impact on the game. Offloads 8 each, passes 126 to excuse me, 177. Possession was dead even, 50-50. Territory 55-45 in favour of Clermont. Then on to defence. Tackles made 166 to 185. And tackle success 82% versus 84%. And, 82 from Clermont is roundabout right there on the pass mark for Champions Cup level, and 84 for Glasgow, just a little bit better, obviously. Turnovers won then 6-5. On to set piece. So lineouts 14 from 14 for Clermont for 100%, and then 10 wins for Glasgow there at 83%. So I think that's 10 out of 11 in that one. Next then, scrums won 5-6. 63% for Clermont, 75% for Glasgow, and we saw the battle in the scrum go, back and forth. And again, it was one of the things that made the game exciting. We didn't see like one dominant front row, just winning penalty after penalty, and both teams competitive at times. And then as personnel changed as well, we saw that kind of balance, swinging back and forth between the teams. On to kicking then. Kicks from hand, 14 for Clermont, which is, normally you see teams somewhere up around 20, so it's definitely down on the average. 24 from Glasgow, it's pretty much right on that average. And then 413 metres kicked from Clermont to 531 for Glasgow. So you can kind of see from that, Clermont's kicks were, trending at just over 30 metres per kick, and Glasgow were more towards the 20-25 metres, and they put up more contestable kicks, and you can see that from the next stat as well. Retained kicks, just 1 for Clermont and 9 for Glasgow. And I talk about it so many times, because a lot of people, they only watch, say, big Champions Cup games or Six Nations games or stuff like that, and they don't really watch too much of the domestic stuff, and then they complain about too much kicking in the game. But every time we look at the stats, it's almost always the teams that play the most exciting rugby that actually kick most often, because they know putting up those contestables creates that broken field rugby that allows the players who are able to react the best and able to exploit positions like that, where it's not just all set defense to make magic happen. And Glasgow are one of those teams that can do that. And unsurprisingly, they're also a team who like to put up a lot of contestable kicks. On to then the breakdown. So Rooks won 102 to 99, and 99% for Clermont and 97% for Glasgow. So pretty decent from both of them. Turnovers won then at Maul. Rooks are Maul 6-5, and then Maul totals 9-5. 89% success for Clermont and 100% success for Glasgow. And obviously the big one for Glasgow was getting over for the try for their one. So then onto discipline. 14 penalties conceded for Clermont and 12 for Glasgow. So certainly that's a definite work on for them, because when you go in, they're obviously going to go into the round of 16 and almost certainly progress, I would say, to the quarterfinals at least. Hopefully they can make a semi-final this year, and maybe beyond. But 12 penalties conceded, again, you're always looking to keep that number in single digits and as low as you can. So that's definitely a work on for them. 1 yellow card for Clermont and two at the same time for Glasgow. Okay, so let's talk about the teams. First of all, Clermont, very tenacious in the game, really. Again, you look at a lot of French teams in the same scenario, what was it, 19-0 down, and heads drop and thoughts go to, okay, well, we're out, like, especially given the first 2 rounds, we're probably out of this competition. There's no point in trying from here. And, it can end up being just a procession for Glasgow to win the game. Clermont are not like that, though. And this competition is in their DNA. They've never won it, but they're one of the teams who've never won it that I wish had, because they take us so seriously. And it's the whole, it's not just, let's say a coach or a couple of players. It's all of the fan base and everyone around the club kind of understands that Clermont take the Champions Cup or the old Heineken Cup very seriously, and they treat it with the respect I think that it deserves, and that's brilliant to see, because I wish that more teams did that, and just kind of respect the history of it. And that's why when you kind of think back to the times where Clermont came so close to actually winning the competition, why they're involved in some of those classic games, that people think about when they look back on kind of the golden era of this competition. So really fair play to them for that. And also, not just the effort, but then the execution as well, to get themselves back within a score. They couldn't then go on beyond that to get the win, but at least they put themselves in the position to potentially win the game. For Glasgow then, brilliant start for them. And then obviously had that wobble where Clermont did come back at them, but they were able to go again. And that's what you need in this competition, is that, because when you're in the knockout stages, you're almost certain that something like that is going to happen to you, right? That it's not going to be like a perfect performance all the way through. A lot of times we'll see the team that, ends up lifting the trophy are a team that have had to overcome some kind of adversity on their way to the final. It's very rare that a team just sails all the way through, hockeying everybody, nobody coming within 2 or 3 scores of them all the way through to the final, and then just breezes through the final. Generally, when you get to the final, you need that grit in your play and in your team, and you need to be able to deal with situations like that. Glasgow dealt with it very well today, and my hope is that now they're gonna, I think, as I said, from the pool stages, I think it's their best performance, but now take that on into the knockout stages and deliver whatever it happens to be, but the best campaign that Glasgow ever produced in the Champions Cup.